excited to be in God's house today? Would you put your hands together, make some noise for Jesus this morning? Come on, give him your praise. So good to be with you. I wanted to welcome all of you joining us on the other sides of computer screens and tablets and phones. You're part of our online community. We're so glad you are along for the ride, whether you're watching this back on playback or right here on live stream. We are glad that you're part of our community. We're really excited today because we're kicking off a brand new series, a series called Let's Talk About It. And we're talking about the things that you wanted to know about. You actually helped to design this series that we're in, because on Easter, we asked you to fill out a survey. And it was just covering some topics that maybe you wanted to know more about. And you guys did such an amazing job. We had an incredible response that come back. And so we're going to design this entire series about the issues and the topics, the things that you want to know more about. We're going to talk about it. In fact, today, we're going to talk about the number one result that came back. This is the thing that everybody wants to hear about. And oddly enough, it is the number one thing that everybody wanted to hear about last year. It's the second year in a row that made number one on the list that you are interested to know about, and that is the topic of stress. We're stressed out. We want to know more about stress. Stress was the number one thing that people said, Pastor, I need to know some things about stress because I'm feeling a little bit stressed out. And the truth is I get that. I understand why people feel like that should be the first thing that we talk about, because we are a stressed people. In fact, could I just be transparent and honest with you today? Can I make a confession? Could you handle a confession of a pastor this morning? Here's the confession. I love Jesus. I trust Jesus. But if I'm honest, there are some things in this life that I have a difficult time just fully trusting him on. The pastor, right? Like I know that, but you could relate that there might be some things in this life that you feel like I love Jesus. I want to trust him fully, but there's just, if I'm honest, there's some things that I deal with on a day-to-day basis that can be really challenging to fully trust him over, because I'm uneasy about some things. And look around the world today, there's a whole lot to be uneasy about. And so I don't know if you feel as though you're stressed out right now. A lot of people say they feel stressed out. Let's just be open and honest today. Can we just be honest? Have you felt stressed out before? Raise your hand if you've ever felt stressed out. Yeah, look around. There's some stressed out people in this place. We can feel stressed out. Stress affects every one of us. Like, we're all at different parts of our life, we feel stressed. And some of that stress is self-imposed. We'll talk about that. But some of it is just, it happens to us. In fact, I want us to get a good working definition of what stress really is. And so right there in your notes, you can open up your worship guide, pull out your notes, you can follow along with this. Right at the top, I gave us a definition of stress. Stress is an outside force applying pressure. That's what stress is. Stress is not something that you have, therefore, it is something that happens to you, right? Now stress can cause some internal things to happen to you, and stress can cause you to feel a certain way. But stress comes from an outward force. It's actually an outward thing, an external thing that is happening to you. I have a brother-in-law, he's an engineer, and he would tell you that when the external pressure is greater than the internal strength, what results is a stress fracture. Now, that's a really fancy way of saying that when the pressure is so big on something that's not strong enough to withstand it, that something's going to break. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many of us feel as though we're stressed. And we feel pressure because there's so many stressors that happen all around us. This is the reason why for 2 years running, everyone says, the thing I want to know about most is about stress. How do I handle stress? What do I do with this? We're a stressed out people. It's amazing how many people feel stressed today. In fact, I went online and looked, and according to the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, you can go online and check this out, they said that we are a stressed out people. In fact, 80% of U.S. students reported feeling stressed throughout the day, either sometimes or quite often. Kids are feeling stressed. Our children are stressed out. This was talking about students that are elementary age students. When I read that, I thought, what could an elementary student be stressed out about? But if you think about it, they're stressed about similar things that we are. They're stressed about making good grades, and they want to meet all of the friends, and they want to get their assignments done on time, and they get stressed out about bullies, and they get stressed out about getting it all done. They are stressed out kids in elementary school. Elementary school students shouldn't feel stressed, and yet they are. And then you go on to junior high. And junior high, on top of all of that other stuff, now you get popularity thrown in the mix, and you got to worry about that and surging hormones. I think junior high can be so damaging and difficult. I'm glad they only let you do it for 2 to 3 years because it's really a challenging season of life. Then you go on to high school, and our high school students are incredibly stressed out because I think one of the reasons that they're stressed out is they start to realize I'm not going to be in school forever. And actually, my decisions are going to determine my destiny. Some of you are over 40, and you're thinking, now you're stressing me out because I probably should have figured that out when I was 16. Right? We're stressed out. All kinds of people are stressed out in different ways. People are stressed out when you get out of high school, you go to college or go right to work, and it's just stress after stress after stress that are hitting us all the time. People are worried, like, am I going to stay single forever? Am I ever going to get married? And then you do get married, and you start thinking, well, am I going to stay married, right? People get stressed, can I have kids? They're stressed out because they can't have kids, and then they do have kids, and they're even more stressed out. Right? Because this little person is waking you up at 4:56 in the morning asking what the opposite of J is. And you're like, what? It's so stressful, right? There's so many stressful things that happen to us all the time. And we are stressed out people. In fact, I'm 45 years old, and I feel like I'm under more stress than maybe I've ever been in my life. Why is it that we feel like we're so stressed out? We're so stressed out. Somebody told me the other day, they were explaining death, and they said that it's like an eternal rest. And for a minute, I thought, well, that doesn't sound that bad. Right? We're just stressed. And I'm not trying to make light out of anything. I'm just saying that we feel stressed as a people. I don't know who you are and what you are going through, but I know that everybody handles stress differently. Men handle it differently from women, and women handle it differently from men. Older people handle it differently from younger people. You just learn to take naps, and I think there's some wisdom there. Sometimes you have to learn rhythms where you just stop and take a nap. That's a biblical thing, I believe. But I don't know what stress you're dealing with, but I do know this, you're under some stress, because we're all stressed out people. We've got more stress happening to us than ever before, more stressors that occur to us than ever before. And this stress causes us to respond in all of these different ways. I don't know what it is and what it looks like for you, but stress to me actually feels a little bit like this. This is how I kind of picture stress. It's like a weird little monkey, right? It's just right there on my shoulder, right? And the stress is there, and I look at this little monkey, and I think, well, I can handle this. Like, I can work with this. It's okay. But then something interesting happens to this little monkey. It's just like, doesn't this kind of feel like stress to you? It's like I got stuff that I'm trying to do and I'm trying to accomplish, but I've got the bills and I got the deadlines and I got stuff going on at work, and then the car breaks down and I got a health issue and I got to take the kids to practice and I got to do the laundry and and it's like one thing after another. It's just stress and then thing and then deadline and then bang, 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 like going on in your head. Does this not feel like stress? Like, I don't know if I'm the monkey or if the monkey in the stress is the stress. I just feel like this is what stress feels like to me. Sometimes it goes on for so long that you just want to look at the little monkey and go, ah! Right? It's like I'm so done with this stress. All I want to do is figure out a way to get the monkey to hush. Will you hush, monkey? In fact, that's exactly what I want to do right now, is figure out a way to get this thing to hush so I can preach. This is exactly what stress feels like. It's like there's something not done, and it's constantly banging away in my brain, and it gets me to worry, because stress can lead to that. If you don't handle stress in the right way, because of the fact that it feels like it never stops, there's something always going on. Stress will develop and turn into something very dangerous called worry. And because worry doesn't just stay worry, it actually develops into something else, anxiety. And anxiety is different than stress. Anxiety is the result of a lot of stress in your life. Sometimes stress can lead to worry. Worry can lead to anxiety. And anxiety can cause us to make some really dumb choices, some damaging choices, destructive choices. And then when we make those choices, it brings on more stress. It's what I call the doom loop. Worry and stress. Stress leads to worry. Worry leads to anxiety. Anxiety leads to bad decisions. Bad decisions bring about more stress, and I'm just more worried. In fact, I'll lie in bed at night thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow. Anybody else be honest enough to say that? Yeah, we have these moments where it's like I'm so worried about what's going to happen that I can't even enjoy today. I'm too worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. Jesus actually had some really good wisdom for us on this when he said this in Matthew 6:34. He said, "Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And when I hear that, I think, man, that sounds fantastic, Jesus, but how do you practically do that? How do we really practically handle our lives in such a way that we're not worried about tomorrow? Well, I think there's a number of different reasons why we're experiencing the stress and the external forces that are pressing down on us. One of the most obvious one is that you've just taken on too much, right? You have too many projects, too many tasks, too many responsibilities, too many things that are on our plate. And that can cause us to be stressed out because there's just simply too much happening. It's like there's too many clanging cymbals that are banging around in our head, and we just need to take some of those things and just say no to them. Because a lot of times what we're doing is saying yes to something that really doesn't matter. It's really not the most important thing. It's really not the thing that God has for my life. And so many times we say yes to things, and we get caught up saying yes to these pressures and these problems. And so someone hands the little monkey another cymbal, right? It's like as soon as I feel like I've gotten caught up, there it is again. And I'm like, just hush, monkey, right? This is the problem that we have in our lives. We've just taken on too much. And so if you have your notes, I want you to take out your notes. Follow me along as we write this down. Number one, the first thing that you need to do is learn to manage your monkeys. If this is stress, you've got to figure out a way to manage these monkeys. If you don't learn to manage your monkey will manage you. It's just the truth of the matter. And so what do I mean by this? Well, I'm talking about, is it possible for you to take a leave of absence from the PTA? Right? Do you have to sign up your kids for 11 activities, or is 1 or 2 just enough? Is there something going on at work that you have said yes to because you want to advance and you want the promotions and you want to do all the things, but honestly, there's just too much on your plate and you need to say no to that thing? Is there something in your life that you could say, hey, I need some help in this area? It's heavy and I can only grab one end. Will you help me? Can you step back from something? See, not doing everything is not a sin. And there are moments in our life where I feel like we feel like that. Like, it's not a failure. You're not a failure if you don't do everything. And sometimes, I don't know what it is, but we've got it in our heads. We get so overloaded that we say that, man, somebody put this on me and I just can't say no. Let me be blunt with you today. Can I pastor you today? Let me be blunt with you. Yes, you can. You can say no. Like it's possible. Did you know that there was only one Messiah and you're not it? Like there's only one Jesus. There's only one person that was strong enough to take it all on, to say yes to everything, that he could take it all on his shoulders, and they murdered him. I'm just saying that so many times I think one of the problems that we have is that we keep saying yes to good things, and that makes us say no to great things. And there are some things in your life you need to just completely stop, and you know what those things are. Whatever those things are, you need to stop. And in some cases, it's not that you necessarily have to stop something, it's just out of order. Did you know that God has an order for your life? There is a biblical order. God says, if you'll follow me, if you give me your life, I'll direct your steps. I'll line it up for you. He directs the steps of the righteous people are ordered by God. And he's got an order for your life. Did you know that? And let me tell you the order in case you didn't know. The first thing is God. He says, I've got to sit in the top position. I'm not going to play second fiddle to anybody. You're going to put me first. If you put me first, I'll direct everything else. If I'm not in the first position, hey, just take it all on your own. But he says, if you'll put me first, I'll direct everything else. So God is first. And the very next thing is your spouse if you're married. Sometimes we get this out of whack. Sometimes we go to the third thing, which is your kids. So God, spouse, kids. Some people try and reorient that. And the truth of the matter is your kids, if you have children, are a temporary assignment in Jesus' name. One day they're going to fly off and they're going to start their own nest, right? And so for this temporary time, if you have placed them in the position above your spouse, when they do leave, now you're in an interesting spot because they haven't been in the right position. So God is first, then your spouse, then your kids, if you have them, and then next is your career, and then everything else. So many times we get this completely out of whack. We say, well, I've got to take care of the family, so the career has got to actually be the thing that comes first. Or in some circumstances, we put the career over God. And God says, if that's the way you want to handle it, go ahead. I'll take my hands off of it. And then we get really stressed out when we can't figure out why. Why isn't God blessing this thing? Because God is not in the first position. So sometimes some of the things that we need to do is reorient the things that we are dealing with. In some cases, it could be that you're dealing with stuff and you've taken on stuff that were never really yours to begin with. Are you stressed out about something that God never really wanted you to handle in the first place? right? Are you busy worrying about other people's monkeys? Right? Maybe it's a family member and they're just really unhealthy and they're in a very unhealthy place and they're trying to pull you down into their dysfunction. And it's not to say that you can't help them or offer up some good advice or maybe actually physically be there for them, but don't allow yourself to get obsessed with somebody else's monkey. Maybe sometime at work that you've taken on some responsibilities that's not even your job because you're thinking, well, if it's going to be, it's got to be me. Like if it's going to happen, somebody's got to do it, and I'm going to have to take it on myself. I'm just telling you, there are some things that you might be dealing with and involving yourself in that God never intended for you. Some of you need to learn the age-old proverb, this is not my circus, these are not my monkeys. Right? Some of you need to get that shirt so you can remind yourself that I'm dealing with stuff that God never really intended me to deal with. And if that job is too demanding and has gotten to a place where it has usurped the position that it's supposed to be in, then this is the time that you're going to have some difficult talks. You might have to go to a boss and say, hey, listen, it's time for a hard conversation. Because here's the thing. You work so that you can live. You don't live so you can work. Like, that's not how it was supposed to be. And if you've gotten yourself so stressed out about work, let me tell you something. Like you didn't give birth to work, okay? Your kids need to come before work. Like if you get stressed out about your job and what's happening, you didn't marry the work, okay? You married your spouse. And so in some cases, you just need to have the really difficult and hard decision and say, hey, listen, we're going to have to talk about this. We're going to have to restructure this because I can't keep doing this. Can I be real honest with you? The day that you go and retire or go and be with Jesus, your people at work are going to miss you. They might even have a party for you on your last day. And they're going to say, man, bye, I love you. You know what's going to happen? The very next day, they're going to hire another monkey and hand him a cymbal, right? Because they're going to get that job done. It's going to keep going with or without you. This world will keep spinning with or without you. And so the thing that we have to recognize is that there's sometimes we just have to say no to some things, some difficult things, some hard conversations. Sometimes it's not that we've taken on too much, and sometimes it's not that we've taken on the wrong things. Sometimes we're just not doing the thing we know we're supposed to be doing. Has that ever happened to anybody? Like you know you're supposed to have that hard conversation. You know you're supposed to do that difficult task, but you can't bring yourself to do it because there's room for error. And you think, well, if I were to do this, I might get this wrong, and so I don't want to necessarily do the wrong thing, and so you end up not doing anything at all, thinking that will make it better. But I'm going to tell you it doesn't, because the problem didn't go away. And in fact, now it's just in the back of your head, and you're thinking about it and obsessing about it. And now you lose sleep because you're thinking about what I'm supposed to be doing. Let me just talk to somebody today, and it's the voice of the Lord saying, hey, that thing that you know you're supposed to do, go ahead and do it. Go ahead and get that thing done. It might be challenging. It might be difficult, but God is saying, go ahead and get that thing done. Stop overanalyzing it. Stop thinking about it. Overanalysis will lead to paralysis. And you may have stopped and feel paralyzed because you're overthinking it. Now listen, I'm going to talk to somebody today because I want to be real practical for you. That's what this series is designed to do, to just give you practical things to handle these topics, these issues that you're dealing with. And I want to be practical, but I do want to tell you that maybe you have found yourself in the doom loop. That I want to work on all of those things. I want to do that the right way. But the truth of the matter is I felt so much stress, and that stress has caused me to worry, and that worry has brought about anxiety, and I just can't even see my way out. And if that's what you're feeling right now, you should know that God has something to say for you. 1 Peter 5:7 says it this way: cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. And He says if you're feeling that way and you feel so overwhelmed, just hand it over to Him. Because God meticulously cares for those who are His. That's what Jesus says. He says He's looking after you. Do you know that there's nothing that's happening in your life that God doesn't know about? And that can be challenging to think of sometimes. Like, God knows that I'm going through this challenging and difficult spot. But He also said, I'll never leave you. I'll never fail you. I'll never forsake you. This world may fail you. Things may fail you. But Jesus said, I'll never leave you and fail you and forsake you. He's always going to be there. And there's a lot of times that we're going through some stuff and we're holding on to it so tightly. And God says, if you'll just hand that over to me, I can help you with it. So sometimes it's because we've allowed too much stuff on our plates. Sometimes it's inactivity. And another reason that we feel the effects of stress so much is because of something I call the comparison trap. We start to compare ourselves to other people. I look at what I have, and I'm not content with what I've been given, and so I start to look over and I start to think, man, what do they have? And how come I don't have that thing? Did you know that America is simultaneously the most blessed nation on the planet and the most stressed nation on the planet? This is one of the reasons I think why that is true. Because we've become in love with our stuff. Like if I don't have new stuff or enough stuff or better stuff or at least better than my neighbor's stuff, then I start to think, well, this is proof that God doesn't love me. And I start to worry and obsess over what you have. And I stop thinking about what I've been given. This is something that we see a lot. In fact, there was recently a study that was done on this with monkeys. And I think it illustrates the point really, really well. So why don't you take a look?
So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group. They know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. Now, if you give the partner grapes, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber, and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again.
We have found that that is not only true of monkeys, it's true of you too, you little stressed monkeys. We're doing that same exact thing. It's like we were fine with what we had until we realized that there was somebody else that had something else, which is why, if you're following along in your notes, you should write this down. Number 2, you need to learn to be cool with your own cucumbers. Okay? You need to learn to be fine with what God has given you, the portion that you have. You need to stop looking over and comparing yourself with what everybody else has. Like, why was she invited and I wasn't? Why do they have more shoes than Zappos, right? And I don't. Like, all of a sudden you start to look and compare. And the moment that you start to do that, suddenly what you have isn't good anymore. That's when you start to bring stress on yourself. Why? Because comparison does this interesting thing. Comparison makes you either feel better about yourself than someone else or worse about yourself than someone else. And neither one of those things honors God. The great President Theodore Roosevelt once said it this way. He called it this. He said, comparison is the thief of joy. I think there's wisdom in that, because I think that's exactly what it does. Like, it steals the joy. It robs what I have. Because I was completely fine with my cucumbers until I noticed she's got grapes. And now suddenly my cucumbers aren't good anymore. I think as Americans, we've just gotten this thing in our heads where we don't want everything, we just want the the better, the smarter, the prettier, the wealthier, you know what I'm talking about? And then once we get the then we want the S, the smartest, the bestest, the prettiest, the healthiest, right? We just got to have the S, right? Am I talking to anybody today? You see, that's okay. You can just polish your little halos and sit there. I know we're dealing with this, okay? Because there's a reason why we have the kind of stress that we have. And this is part of it, that we have learned to compare ourselves to what everybody else has. And that comparison trap is dangerous. And it doesn't just bring stress, it actually dishonors God. Let me show you how. In Hebrews 12:2, it says this: let us run with perseverance, and I love what the author said about this, the race that's marked out for us. So in other words, there's a specific race that God has you running. And I can't win your race, and you can't win my race. I've got an assignment that God has for me. You've got an assignment that God has for your life.
And the quickest way to start feeling the stress is to take your eyes off of what God has. Look what he says. He says in that same verse, Hebrews 12:2, he said that you are to fix your eyes on what? On me? On your neighbor? On your friend's feet? No, he said fix your eyes on Jesus. He's the perfecter, the pioneer of your faith. See, this is how you are to run your race, is to fix your eyes on Jesus, because I want to please him. I want to serve him. I want to show him. I want to live for him. I want to bring glory to him. The fastest way for me to stop realizing who God has called me to be is to fix my eyes on somebody else's feet. I've got some kids, and they've run track and cross country over the years. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I've had to tell them over the years, is if you want to win, if you want to win your race, if you want to run really well, stop doing this. So many times I've watched runners just looking behind them to see who's coming up, and left and right to see who's on either side. And Jesus says if you'll stop doing that and stop being obsessed about who's around you and just focus on the finish line, and Jesus is the finish line, you'll win the race. And so many times I think we get obsessed about what people think about us. And being obsessed about what their opinion is the fastest way to forget about what God's opinion is towards you. And so many times we do this. We start to get stressed out because we're starting to think, what do they think? Am I going to measure up? Is what I'm doing going to make them like me? And we get stressed out about this. Now, sometimes the problem is that we want more. Sometimes we're worried about what other people have. And I think a lot of times what we have stress over is the fact that we're worried if there's even going to be enough. Anybody ever felt like that? Like, is there going to be enough money at the end of the month? Yeah. Is there going to be enough for me? Am I going to have enough? Does God care enough about me that it will be there when I need it? Well, listen to Jesus' words about that. This is what he says. He said, therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Let me show you something. Jesus is being very, very practical here. He's looking at a people group who are stressed out. We've all been stressed out. And this group that he's sitting there talking to, they were stressed out about a lot of things. And he starts relating to them about stuff that would stress them out. Don't be stressed about food or about what you're going to wear or your body. He says stop being stressed about those things because there's so much more to life. Now he's talking to the things that would have stressed them out in those days. But I believe you could extend this to our day right now. And you could keep going with that list. And whatever it is that you're stressed about, you fill in the blank. He says, don't be stressed about how many likes you get on Instagram. He says, don't be stressed about whether or not you got enough money in the bank. Don't be stressed about whether or not you're going to keep your job, or if you lose your job, if you're going to get another job. These are important things. But he's saying, don't be stressed about it. Don't be stressed about whether or not you're going to get married or stay married or remarried. He's saying, don't get stressed about that. Oh, but Pastor, I'm stressed. I'm stressed about my retirement. I'm stressed about my 401k. I'm stressed about the economy. I'm stressed about the election and what's going to happen from that. He says, listen, all of those things are important, but don't stress about it. Don't worry about those things. Sometimes we get worried about all kinds of things like our health. And I know many of you may have diagnoses that a doctor has said, this is what's happening in your life. And Jesus says, listen, don't worry about that. And we want to say, Jesus, but have you seen, are you paying attention? Did you notice what they diagnosed me with? And Jesus says, yeah, I know all about it, but I'm not worried about it. And you shouldn't be either. We're like, Jesus, I don't know how you do that. I'm not saying that Jesus doesn't care or is trying to tell you not to care about it, but he's saying, don't stress about it. Don't worry about it. Because here's what happens. There's so many times where we get so fixated and so worried about the things that we can see and the things that we can't see that we end up neglecting the life that God's called us to live now. See, this is a challenging thing for us because we start thinking about what's going to happen. We get stressed out over our health. Let's take health, for example. I start to think about, man, what's going to happen with my health? And the more I stress about that, the more I worry about it, that worry, you know what that does? It actually affects my health. And now I've limited what I have because I'm affecting myself with worry. It's dangerous. It's difficult. And Jesus says, if you'll stop spending so much of your time trying to get more time, really, truthfully, this life is short. It's very short. The Bible says every one of us are here and gone in an instant. I mean, the book of James says it's like a vapor. It's like a fine mist. It's like the dew in the morning. You're here and gone instantaneously. And so instead of trying to get more moments, Jesus, I have a little bit more time. I got to have a little bit more moments. Jesus says, stop trying to make more moments in your life and start looking for ways to make more life in your moments. Enjoy what you have. Enjoy what you've been given. Jesus offers us up a way, a different type of mindset that says, listen, I know you've got a lot going on right now. I know that there's a lot on your plate, but don't worry about that. Don't stress about that. You say, well, wait, Jesus, how do you do that? Like, how do we practically do it? That sounds great, but how do you practically do it? Here's what Jesus says in regards to that. He gives us some really practical advice. He says, look at the birds of the air. They don't sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? He says, when you start to feel stress, and you start to feel the effects of that external force pushing down on you, write this down, number 3 in your notes. Here's what you need to do. You need to step back, and you need to look up. That's what he says to do. He says, look, is your life not much more than just food? Is your body not more than clothes? If you'll stop and step back for a minute, you can redirect your focus. You can look up. And you can stop worrying about that, what's going to happen tomorrow. Stop stressing about it. I'm stepping back and I'm looking up and I'm seeing there's more to life. And you might say, well, Jesus, I'm trying to do that. I really am trying to look up, but I got this thing that's hanging over my neck and it's making it tough. And Jesus says, if you would stop, though, and you'd look up, you'd notice birds. When I read that, I thought, that's your advice, Jesus? Birds? What? I'm a bird watching. That's like, maybe that's a stress relief deal. But I can't really see how this is helping my life. Well, look what he says. He says, you know that external force that's keeping you up at night? You know that pressure that you have on you? He says, I recognize that you have it right there, but what you need to do is stop for a moment over-analyzing that thing, thinking about that thing, worrying about that thing. He said, step back and look up, and you'll notice birds. You ever look at some birds up in the air? Oh, when they're up in the air, they just seem so effortless. Right? They're just gliding. Sometimes they would use the thermals on the air, if you ever watch them, and they just soar up there. And they're not even on salary. Right? I mean, you know what you'll never see? A bird really freaking out, stockpiling worms in a barn. Like, if you see that, send it to me. I want to see that. Because you'll never find it. Birds they're not stressed out about that. Birds, you'll never see them stressing out on Instagram all night trying to figure out what their kids are doing. Like, they're just not doing that. It's almost like they don't care, right? The birds just soar. They actually use the negative pressure. Did you know that? There's negative pressure that's coming up, and they soar on that. They actually use that to glide through the air. What is Jesus telling us? He's not saying don't worry about those things. He's saying recognize that there's some stuff out there, but that thing that's keeping you awake, look at those birds. Here's what he says. They don't sow, they don't reap, or store away in barns. And I want everybody to say those next 2 words. Ready? Say them out loud. And yet. No, out loud, not out quiet. Let's say it together. And yet. And yet, your heavenly Father still feeds them. He says they're going through all kinds of stuff. They're not storing, they're not reaping, they're not sowing, they're not stressing out, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. He takes care of them. God says, I take care of the birds of the air. Why? Because they're mine. And he looks after those things that are mine. And then Jesus asks this deep theological question. Look what he says. And it's a question I want us to answer all together. He says this, are you not much more valuable than they? Are you not more valuable to God than some birds? I want everybody to answer that all together. Do you think God cares more about you than some birds? 1, 2, 3. But that was not convincing. That's okay, I'm going to help you. Here's the answer. Yes, God cares about you more than some birds. He loves you more than these birds. And there's a lot of birds. You ever seen how many sparrows there are? He must be a big fan of sparrows. Those things are everywhere. And he says, I know where every one of them are. And he cares about you more than sparrows. And so when you start to feel like this moment, like I'm feeling the effects and the pressure of the stress, and I feel strained, he says, stop, step back, and look up. And it's almost as if Jesus knows us so well. Like we were going to say, yeah, I get that, but Jesus, you don't know what I'm going through. Like I'm going through some stuff, man. Like there's some things on my mind. And it's almost like he knew we were going to say that. Because look what he says next. He says, can all your worries add a single moment to your life? Like is he going to add one more moment to your life? Worry doesn't do anything. It doesn't make your kids safer. It doesn't make your job better. It doesn't make your marriage sweeter. Worry literally changes nothing. And so the point is, you got to step back. You got to look up, and you got to let it go. There's some things in your life that you just got to learn that I don't get it. I don't understand it all. I don't know how it all works, but I'm going to let it go. Because I'm not all that. But he is all that. And if I'm with him, I can have all that. That's what he's telling us today. He's like, I'll take care of everything. And I'm not saying don't care. Jesus is not saying don't care. He's saying don't allow that stress to ruin your day today, where you're thinking about tomorrow, worrying and concerned about what's going to happen or what's not going to happen. None of us are promised not one day. He says take this truth, this nugget of wisdom with you when you go. Stop worrying because it's not going to help you. There's a little Christian cliche, and I know it is what it is, but I think there's some truth to it. It says, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know who holds tomorrow. Because he's the God that's already in tomorrow. He already knows what's going to happen. And so if I would just connect myself with him and learn to walk with him and follow his unforced rhythms of grace, then those moments where I start to feel stressed are the moments that I'll stop, I'll stand back, and I'll look up and say, what am I supposed to think about this, Jesus? There's only one part in all of Scripture where I could find some people that are really worried about something that mattered. And it was the disciples. The disciples were actually really worried because Jesus just dropped some news to them. And he said, hey, I'm going to be murdered. They're going to kill me. But don't worry, I'm going to come back. And that started to freak them out. They're like, wait, if you're gone, we're in trouble. It's the one part of Scripture that actually makes sense, because if Jesus is not there, we're all in trouble. And Jesus says this is what he tells them in this stressful moment, and I think he's speaking this to you too. He says, I've told you these things so that you may have peace. In this world, you will have trouble. In other words, you're going to have some stress, but take heart. I have overcome the world. He says, if you feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders, guess what? I've already taken care of that. I've already defeated death, hell, and the grave. The worst thing that could possibly happen to you in this life is that it got so bad you die. Jesus said, guess what? I beat that too. And if you would just lock arms with me, if you would just trust me in this moment, if you'd stop trying to handle it on your own, and gather it up to your own ways and say, like, it's all up to me. If it's going to happen, it's got to be me. Jesus is this incredible thing. He gives us free will. He says, if you want to do that, I give you the ability, you can do that. You can handle it on your own. But if you'll hand it over to me and partner with me in it, you'll see what I can do as I put my super to your natural, something supernatural.